I have been watching every game. I like this team. I like what's happened so far, and you have a much better mind for it because hockey's probably my least strong sport overall, which is why we get you experts on here. But it's been interesting to watch because I know you cover both. I know you're on the west side of the state here with us, and you cover the Griffins and the Wings, and it seems to me like they've kind of right-sized both teams by some of the moves that they've made because they've reallocated a couple of the more experienced Red Wings to the Griffins, and then they pulled up some of the young talent. So it's like they're using the leadership that they had at the Wings to obviously make a good Griffins squad. They had a lot of young talent already, and I'm sure that the leadership is helping down there. And then this new blood is adding some grit and some of the things that we were needing last year in some of the interviews that we had with you and some of the other folks last year, talking about that grit and toughness. And that seems to be more of an identity of this team under the first full McClellan year. But I'm curious what you see out of both squads and how you see the year going so far here.
A professional sports team from Detroit really embodying grit as their identity. Wow, who would have seen that
right?
coming, right?
Yeah.
But no, I think that you've at least summarized it pretty well there. I think like you said, kind of a transaction of veterans going down to Grand Rapids to the AHL, and then youth coming up to the NHL. And for what it's worth, I think both the Griffins and the Red Wings are playing a fun brand of hockey. The Red Wings, obviously, I think the talk of the town is still Emmett Finney, former 7th-round pick, playing on the top line with Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond. And then after sending Pellica, Nate Danielson just made his NHL debut the other day as well. They're still got some things they got to tighten up. I think the record kind of shows that, but all in all, though, they're playing a more aggressive brand of hockey. They're playing a more, I would say, decisive brand of hockey. And then, like you said, there's that grittiness. They, especially early on when they kind of were racking up their 9 wins, they were finding ways to win games, even games where they didn't necessarily deserve the win. So when you're finding ways to win games that you don't necessarily deserve, I think that's the mark of a good hockey team. Hopefully, they can build on that because they're kind of on a skid right now, I'd say. And then as for the Griffins, they still have yet to lose in regulation. They technically suffered their first loss just the other night against the Chicago Wolves, but that's a fun team as well. It's crazy, all these different young guys have already kind of made a mark in Detroit, and Michael Brandt-Nygaard got sent down, but he's, by all accounts, he's going to be right back up there, if not sometime this season and definitely next season. And then there's a couple other guys that look real good in Grand Rapids too. It's all of a sudden it's almost like the Red Wings have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to this young talent. And that's what you rebuild for, right? It's been a very fun, very exciting season to see in the first month, just because of all the youth kind of coming to a head here.
Even to my untrained eye, it seemed that way last year because you talked about kind of the grit thing and how this was maybe the last team to embody that in this cycle. The Red Wings have been gritty in previous iterations, but in this cycle they maybe lacked that a little bit. And I think the first thing I'm thinking of with what you were saying, that's the one part that I think should hopefully come, because the one thing that they don't necessarily share with the Lions, the Tigers, and even the Pistons are getting better at this here is they are a little bit up and down. They were that way with McClellan last year, and when they hit a skid, they leaned into it pretty hard. Now they're going through a 3-game skid right now. We'll see what that continues to. Hopefully they're able to go on the upswing soon, but the other teams seem to regroup pretty well, and after a loss, they do not want to take a second loss, and obviously that can be said for every team. Nobody wants to lose twice in a row, let alone once, but there's a certain resolve that happens with some of these other teams. So I'm hoping the Wings will develop that, but obviously the goalie pairing and the improved defense and the new blood, hopefully all those elements, and McClellan being there in his first full year and getting Yanni in the mix and all of those things, I think hopefully that should help, but we'll see if they're as up and down, because they had some great win streaks last year, but they were coupled with some losing streaks with McClellan at the helm.
Oh yeah, and it seems like it doesn't matter who's the head coach, whether it's Tom McClellan, Derek Lalone, and even Jeff Blashill a few years ago. This kind of been a pattern where the highs are high, and for periods of time, it almost feels like they can beat anyone in the NHL, and they can compete. They could not just compete for a playoff spot, but they can contend. And then, the next week they lose a game, and then they lose another game, and suddenly they look like one of the worst teams in the league. I agree. Once they kind of figure out how to bounce back from a bad loss, how do they, even just within singular games, when things start to not go their way, it's always kind of a coin flip as to whether they're going to respond the right way or the wrong way. And I don't know, if that's it definitely seems like it's the focus of Todd McClellan and his coaching staff, trying to fix what's between the ears, as he always describes it. And it's going to be interesting to watch, because it's not a technical skill, right? To bounce back. It's very much like a mindset thing, making sure that you're not too down, and you just kind of approach every game with a clean slate. It'll be interesting to see which players are kind of the leaders, who leads the charge on that front, because I agree. That's what's setting the Red Wings apart from their other Detroit counterparts.
And I think what we're talking about with the embarrassment of riches, as you put it well, I think that will help, because they've got, I think that's one of the keys to some of these other teams is the Lions do the next man up thing. They pull people up from the practice squad and then still kind of hold up, even though they've had a lot of injuries. The Tigers have had a very strong, they're probably the most similar to the Wings in that they went through some down years and then they built up their system, and that maybe came to fruition a little bit faster because of the development of certain players. But it's a similar thing where they have a wave of newer, younger guys coming with a fairly young aggregate roster at the main roster, and same with the Pistons. They have a young core, but I think that will help. That, like you said, we could see some of these guys by the end of this season, but either way the outlook looks good, where you've got a couple that were thrown in there. I want to get your take on all of the guys by the end of the interview, but Finney is obviously the main buzz name here. The fact that this is a guy that they thought would be a development piece, that would be a long-term piece, and he is a guy that's developing much faster and much better than anyone would have thought, because it's interesting to me that with the draft in hockey, that when you pick a guy in the 7th round, it's like, well, he's probably not going to make it, and let alone he makes it, and now makes it and is on one of the premier lines here and has acquitted himself nicely. I mean, he's playing like a guy that has nothing to lose here.
Oh, absolutely. I think it won't be long before we start to see a lot of Finney jerseys popping up as the cameras are showing on the broadcast. They're kind of showing crowd shots. I think more and more 58 jerseys are going to start popping up. That's a kid you can root for. He's really impressed me. Kind of to your point there, all of the scouting reports of him were more long-term view. I mean, even me, I was excited about him after last season in the junior level, and I kind of had my thought of keep an eye on him this year. He's gonna probably play a full year in the AHL, and then if things go well for him, maybe he's knocking on the door for NHL call-up. I thought there was a chance for that, to make the team at a training camp, not just to make the team, right, but to also play on the top line. I'm very much in that camp of being very surprised by this player, and to also not just make the team, not just make the top line, but look like he belongs too. I think that Emmett Finney's gonna have a very long career ahead of him, because he already looks like the type of player that can play in a variety of different roles. He excels on that top line with Larkin and Raymond, because he kind of does the dirty work. He's creating space for the other two to really utilize their skill, and Finney puts himself in the right areas too. He's if Larkin gets a shot on net, you usually see him right next to the crease, ready to try to bang home that rebound. And with that that tenacity he plays with, and there's some two-way ability there too. You could also see him slide up and down the lineup. We've already seen that a little bit too, where he can maybe fill a checking role for a time too, depending on what the lineup looks like. So he's like I said, he's an easy player to cheer for, not just because of his story, not just because of where the Red Wings took him in the draft, but he plays a fan friendly brand of hockey. We'll say he's not afraid to muck it up, but he also is able to put up points. He's going to be a lot of fun to watch for a long time.
Which those are some of the traits that we talked about with this draft and the recent drafts, because Yzerman knows better than anybody that this is the type of thing that he needs. I'm sure even he did not think that this was going to come to fruition this early, but that's, I think, the most exciting thing about him is the fact that, like you said, he's got traits that are going to keep him there for a long time, but they're traits that are hard to teach to other people, whereas there should be skill growth in some of the other things, because he's still a very young player. Just because he hit the NHL and is in this first line and is acquitting himself nicely doesn't mean that he won't pick up a ton of skills along the way, but he's got the part that's harder to teach, that toughness, the kind of innate ability. Those things are tougher to teach to people, because you can say, hey, well, we need you to do some of the dirty work. It's easy to say, but it's harder to teach somebody to do that stuff, rather than skill development of, okay, we got to work on your shot from this level of the ice or the passing elements, whatever it is. It's harder to say, hey, well, yeah, go do the dirty work. Well, what does that mean? But he's figured it out.
And it really sends a message to the rest of the Red Wings, the rest of the prospects, everyone throughout their system. If this kid can kind of come out of nowhere and just work his way into the lineup and continue to maintain a spot in the lineup just through pure, hard work, tenacity, and the skill he does have, it sends that message to everybody else. If you work your butt off too, you'll end up in the lineup too, or at least you'll have a shot to end up there. It doesn't necessarily matter where you're drafted. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter, what your specific skill set is. Or even what position you play. If you're willing to put in the work and you've got the talent to kind of complement that work ethic, you're going to get your opportunity, just like Emmett Finney did.
It's a great story for the team and for fans. Like you said, he's going to have many fans alike, because it's a testament to the hard work element and the fact that, hey, this is the type of player we want. We want somebody that is on the grittier side. We're a Detroit sports team, etc. So it's been a fun story, and I want to talk about some of the other young guys and who we may see from the Griffins and what you think of the free agent acquisition so far. But we'll do that after the break here with Devin Little. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Devin Little of the HockeyWriters.com and the Flying Octopus Pod, giving us some good stuff on the Red Wings so far. I'm curious of a couple things here, Devin. I'm curious. I know you've obviously watched the young guys. I want a little bit of a roundup. You did a great article for the Hockey Writers, but I'm curious what you think of the free agent acquisition so far, because that's the other element of this, is the young guys are coming, and that's great. But I feel like as a whole, even though there wasn't a huge marquee acquisitions in the offseason, other than arguably the Gibson trade, where that was a big move and everybody was talking about that, there was a lot of lower key acquisitions in the offseason. But I think it seems like this group has done a good job overall and added some of those elements that we're talking about with Finney, at least from my assessment of it so far.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny. Heading into the season, a lot of talk was about what Steve Yzerman didn't do. In the offseason, there was a real hunger for a big splash one way or another, whether it was a free agent signing or a trade or whatever. Obviously, that didn't go down, but here we are. We're hopped up on rookie mania. We're very excited about the rookie talent here in Detroit. But like you said, there's also the moves that Yzerman did make, and they kind of, to some extent, are getting maybe a little overlooked and underappreciated. Mason Appleton's probably the most notable one, that at least everyone will kind of quickly think of. Oh yeah, they brought him in. Appleton's kind of surprised me this season in terms of his ability to move up and down the lineup. I remember when Lucas Raymond went down for a couple games, Appleton assumed his role on the top line with Darren Larkin and Emmett Finney. And I was a little puzzled by it, but then by the end of the game, Appleton scored the game-winning goal. So I was quickly converted into, all right, this guy belongs on the top line now, guy. But no, Appleton's been really good. He's been a real positive force on the penalty kill. I think just real quick in general, the penalty kill looks leap and bounds better than it did last season, which not hard to do necessarily, but you can tell that the personnel additions and just more time with the coaching staff has really benefited that special teams unit. JVR, James Van Riemsdyk, has been a nice solid presence on the fourth line. Obviously, he has a lot of size. He's a veteran. He's definitely not, the premier power forward he was a decade ago. But he's a real solid presence in that bottom six. I think that he's somebody, just the other day against Chicago, the second power play unit had a bunch of first and second year players. They had Casper, they had Finney, Sanjin Pelika, and then there's James Van Riemsdyk there as kind of like, the uncle basically, of the group there. And that kind of shows what he can do, what he brings to the group. He's solid. He can crush the net. He's a big dude. I think he's 6'3" or 6'4". So he's hard, he's hard to move, and then he can complement these young, enthusiastic forwards that just kind of need a sturdy guy to crash home and maybe pop in a rebound from time to time. And then I guess to kind of round out the free agents there, the Red did bring in a couple of right-handed defensemen, Travis Hamonic and Jacob Bernard Docker. I think that this is an area where I know I was a little concerned heading into the season for this team, because this is where I thought the Red Wings needed to make a big move, was on defense. They didn't really add anybody on the left side. They didn't really add anybody notable on the right side. Little did I know that Axel Sending Pelika would be, ready to go right off the hop here. But to their credit, I think both Bernard Docker and Hamonic have brought what they're expected to bring to the lineup. Hamonic is he's a 35-year-old veteran of almost just over 900 games. So he's been there, he's done that. He's kind of expected to play in his own zone, block a few shots, make sure the goalie can see the puck, and then get off the ice once the puck leaves the zone. And then Bernard Docker is kind of, he's assigned to play a similar game. I think he's been kind of an underrated, pleasant surprise for me in terms of being a free agent addition. I actually think he looks really good on that third pairing with Albert Johansson. I think that he plays a very simple game, is able to move the puck up ice and just kind of let the forwards do their thing. He doesn't overthink things. He's 25. He fits kind of the age profile of the team right now. And then if he's not working, then you have the veteran Hammock there to kind of switch in and switch out. But like you said, overall, I think the free agents, not the most eye-popping names you could have gotten in free agency, but they're all kind of filling the role just exactly the way you'd hope they would. And it's allowed the team to really get a sense of, how they look elsewhere in the lineup. They don't have to worry about their fourth line. Now they can really, because they have Mason Appleton there and they have JVR there. Now they can really focus in on the middle six and what they can do to improve their depth there. Just these small, savvy additions to stabilize things. Sometimes that's what you need to, like I said, stabilize things before you can start building upward.
I think that's a good point in a general team building sense, because everybody wants to make the big swing, but the problem with the big swing is that's a home run swing, and these were a bunch of small additions, like you said, that were low risk and potentially not necessarily high reward, but medium reward. Whereas if they don't work out, there's really not a lot invested in them. They shouldn't mess with the culture too much or take up too much of the cap or anything like that. And I think, pretty much all of them have acquitted themselves well. I'm glad you mentioned Bernard Docker, because I think he's not necessarily the first name out of people's mouths, but he's one that stuck out to me. He just always seems to do a solid job. The main thing that I wanted to take, you gave great information there, but were we all almost going to get a rookie mania running wild brother from Devin Hulk Little? That I felt like we were close to that.
Oh, very close, very close.
I mean, just let that fly. We like a good wrestling reference on this show, so that's if you can do that in a future appearance, that would make me very happy here. That would throw me off as much as I throw you off by asking you about cupcakes and hoagies and stuff to start the interview. So that's
noted.
That's great. But no, it's good to highlight all these free agents, because I think although the rookies have taken over and we have had rookie mania, there's been a lot of good additions from the free agency acquisitions over the summer. But I'm curious what you think. I know you did a good article about the roundup of the talent kind of around the Griffins and the minor league system. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because in September you wrote an article about the goalie pairing at the main roster, and I've been kind of focused on this part where it seems like they're trying to get a succession plan going, and now we've got to figure out who the next man up is going to be behind the two clear current incumbent starters, the 1A and 1B that they have in Gibson and Talbot. But it sounds like the goalies are playing well throughout the system, and there's a lot of other talent that stuck out to you. So I wanted to get your feel for the talent in the Griffins and the rest of the minor league system here.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way or a good place to start, right? In goal. The good news when it comes to Red Wings goaltending, not just that they do have a 1A, 1B, or at least it seems like it in the early going here with Gibson and Talbot. They have a 1A and 1B in Grand Rapids too. Both Sebastian Kosa and Mikhail Postava have been very solid to start the season. Obviously, like I mentioned before, the Griffins had been undefeated until recently. Both Postava and Kosa have 4 wins and 4 appearances. Kosa has a shutout in there. Their save metrics are both looking real good. Postava, I guess to me, has really stood out just because he kind of came out of nowhere. He was one of those European free agents the Red Wings signed late spring, early summer. Didn't really grab headlines. No one really knew who he was. You know, he's only a few months older than Sebastian Kosa, though, so he's still a young guy, and he looked really good over in the Czech Pro League last season, and that's kind of what grabbed the Red Wings' attention. And then he looked really good in training camp, I thought. And then in preseason, I thought he looked good when he got the opportunity. And now whenever he's getting the opportunity with the Griffins, he's still looking really good. He looks like a starter caliber goaltender, at least at the AHL level. And I think that, Kosa has still continued to build on the success that he's had at the AHL level too. He's dealing with a minor injury right now. Actually, they both are. They're dealing with minor injuries. So, obviously got to keep an eye on that, but neither of them seem like they're super big deals right now. But yeah, it's not a stretch to say that one or both of them could be pushing for time, pushing for playing minutes in the NHL by season end. And that'll be interesting to see, I guess, who gets these opportunities when they're there and how they fare in those opportunities. Because we talk about all the young talent that's on the Red Wings roster right now, and the one position where they don't have young talent is in goal. But they certainly have a lot of it in the system, and it just kind of seems like a matter of time before it starts to pour into Detroit. And then for what it's worth, looking beyond Grand Rapids, there's Trey Augustine, who, depending on who you ask, he's the best goalie prospect in the system, and he's looking really good for Michigan State, just like he did last season. He's going to be a very interesting topic of discussion come springtime when the Spartans are finishing up their season, and it's time for the Red Wings to decide whether or not they want to give him a contract, because he's going to want to go somewhere to play. And if Kosa and Postava are both looking really good in Grand Rapids, there's not going to be playing time in Grand Rapids for Augustine, so that'll be interesting to monitor. But that's a long time away. And then I guess kind of staying in college, I got to Michigan State with Augustine. Let's stay at the collegiate level. Prospect Max Plantz is probably the most exciting player in college hockey right now. And that's not even necessarily an exaggeration. He leads NCAA in point production. He has 22 points in 12 games, which is almost 2 points a game, which is insane. playing over there for University of Minnesota Duluth, 10 goals, 12 assists. And the cool thing about this production, too, is that he's not necessarily a merchant in any way. He's not, just banging home rebounds. He's not getting secondary assists. He's getting these points. He's accumulating these points in a lot of different ways. He's creating points off the rush. He's scoring goals, beating goalies clean. He's being the primary setup man on some of these plays. So he's finding a lot of different ways to have an impact, and he is having a tangible impact in the form of goals. He's a former second-round pick. And again, he's kind of another one of those pieces that it's like, oh my gosh, the Red Wings have all these guys coming all of a sudden, almost all at once. Just like Augustine's going to be an interesting player to keep an eye on come contract time. I think Plant is definitely playing himself into consideration right now. I know it's still very early, but what he's doing right now, I couldn't tell you the last time the Red Wings had a collegiate prospect that performed at this level. It's astonishing, honestly. And then just to kind of finish out who I highlighted in that article, Eddie Gemborg, who I likened to the Punisher back in when he was drafted. He is succeeding over in Sweden's top league, which is arguably the second best hockey league in the world. Genborg plays a very physical, very demanding style of hockey. He I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being kind of like a Thomas Holmstrom type in the NHL level, where he kind of just needs to stand his ground. He's going to take some punishment, but he's going to be there to bang home rebounds and create space for more skilled line mates. He's on the top line for his Swedish team right now, and he's accumulated 13 points in 18 games by kind of just being the motor on that line. The other guys are more the scorers, and he's kind of just banging and crashing and creating space, and then the puck goes off of him, or he's there to bang home a rebound, or he just kind of gets the puck to his line mates. He's a smart player, and he kind of knows how he's built. He knows how to use his frame to his advantage. He was an exciting player when the Reds drafted him this past summer, and to see him already kind of translating it over in Sweden is it just kind of is furthering his stock even more. So like we've kind of been talking about, there's all this young talent on the NHL roster that is, we're all excited about it, and we should be, but you start to look just beyond the NHL roster. You look in the AHL, you look in the NCAA, you look in the European leagues, and it's like, how are they going to have roster spots for all these guys? Because there's all of a sudden a lot of talent that's just really exciting. And I know that, I'm a prospect guy, so maybe go figure, I'm excited by all these guys. And it's more likely that a lot of them aren't going to be who they look like they are today. But man, if there's anything that this year seems to be kind of proving, it's that the Red Wings scouting department seems to know what they're doing.
We're going to have to check in on a lot of these things. This is one of the reasons that I like that we've kind of flip the format a little bit so that we can cover the Wings throughout the season, because I think this is going to be a fun season from both the prospect side and the main roster side. They're starting off well. They've got all these guys coming. I've got a lot of notes already for our next interview when we check in with you, because you're talking about kind of the right sizing of the roster and, okay, what do we do? Do we trade away a goalie? You mentioned that in your article to maybe clear room for Kosa and Augustine and some of the other guys eventually. I think we need to follow Rookie Mania, brother, here and for next time. And also, this is a very random thought to leave you with, but has anyone thought, I know I get stuck on the 3-letter people because I like that with ASP and JVR and all these guys, but has anybody thought to attach a snake nickname to Sandin Pellikka? Because I think that could get some legs or lack thereof.
You know what? If you start the chant, I'll join in on it. I think that's a good idea.
I feel like then we're going past the acronym part, and then we're going to the ASP part, and then he's the snake. So I think that's got some. We'll work on that. We'll workshop that in between the interviews here. But appreciate you joining us. Always great stuff. Always fun. Always informational. Be sure to tell people where to follow you on social media, the writing, and the podcast here.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again for having me on. Always fun to talk puck with you. If you're looking to follow me, be sure to follow me over on pretty much any social media channel at Hockey with Devin. Be sure to check out my writing over at the Hockey Writers. I have an article coming out tomorrow, as a matter of fact, looking at the Red Wings' third pairing. And then, yes, as you mentioned as well, be sure to check out my podcast, the Flying Octopus podcast. Me and my co-stars there, I guess we'll call ourselves, or my podmates. We put on a good show, I believe, and looking forward to seeing some of you out there if you give us a follow.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall, DDS, Calder Financial Group, Grand Management, Rydan Investments, JH Realty Partners, and Encore Business Group. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on Jethro FM.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.